Clark, pull up three. You bet!
Caitlin Clark's long-awaited return to Iowa was more than a preseason matchup. It was an emotional homecoming that resonated across the basketball world as a landmark moment in the evolution of women's sports. The energy surrounding her reappearance in Carver Hawkeye Arena transcended the typical fanfare, transforming into an overwhelming outpouring of support that shook the very foundation of the venue. With 15,000 fans packed inside, some having traveled across state lines and paid hundreds of dollars just to witness the occasion, the atmosphere reached deafening levels, topping 116 decibels before the ball even tipped. This wasn't just another exhibition. It was a spiritual return for a player who had elevated Iowa basketball to national prominence, and her presence ignited a celebration unlike anything the WNBA preseason has ever seen. Her walk onto the court was met with thunderous applause, emotional tears, and a sea of homemade signs. But what stood out most was the emotional resonance Clark carried into this moment, the weight of legacy, the pride of place, and the unmistakable look of someone who knew this game was more than just a statistic in a box score. She was home, and it was as if the entire state of Iowa paused to welcome her back. Clark's reappearance also marked a stark reminder of the power of sports in shaping identity, culture, and community. Every dribble echoed through generations of Hawkeye fans who had watched her grow from a freshman phenom into a professional beacon of the women's game. The sheer intensity of the crowd before, during, and after the game underscored the cultural significance of Clark's return. For many, this was the first opportunity to see her in a WNBA jersey on her old court, and it felt like a passing of the torch between the collegiate and professional levels. Fans lined up for hours in unpredictable weather, wrapping around the arena in numbers that rivaled Final Four showdowns. And while the matchup itself featured the Indiana Fever taking on Brazil's national team, the spotlight never wavered from the hometown hero. Even Clark's teammates, aware of the historical magnitude, embraced the moment wholeheartedly. Lexi Hull sported a Caitlin Clark Iowa jersey during warm-ups in a heartfelt show of camaraderie and respect. The stadium wasn't just buzzing. It was vibrating with an energy that was impossible to ignore. As Clark addressed the media before tip-off, she spoke with a humility and gratitude that reflected both her Midwest roots and her awareness of how much this moment meant to so many people. But perhaps the most revealing moment came when she paused, looked around the arena, and said it felt like being in college again. That honest reflection encapsulated the deep emotional connection she still holds with Iowa, and the loyalty that fans continue to show her in return. The game hadn't started yet, but the story had already been written. This was a moment for the history books. The tip-off marked the beginning of a spectacle that didn't disappoint. Within moments, Clark settled into a rhythm that made it hard to believe she had been away from competitive basketball for 7 months. Her first shot, a deep three-pointer from her signature spot just beyond the arc, was a poetic reintroduction. It wasn't just any three. It came from the exact location where she once broke Kelsey Plum's NCAA scoring record, and it brought the house down in a moment so perfect it could have been scripted. The symbolism wasn't lost on the crowd or the commentators. It was Caitlin Clark reclaiming her narrative, reminding everyone that despite the new jersey, the magic remained unchanged. She moved with confidence, executed precise passes, and showed an elevated level of physicality that hinted at a focused offseason of strength training and preparation. Her improved frame helped her absorb contact more efficiently, and rather than being thrown off balance as she might have been a year prior, Clark finished through defenders with poise. The opening quarter proved she hadn't just maintained her skill set, she had evolved. And with each dribble, it became increasingly clear that Clark wasn't easing into her professional career. She was launching herself forward with every ounce of momentum she could generate. The game may have been technically meaningless in terms of standings, but to the fans, the team, and Clark herself, it meant everything. Beyond her own performance, what stood out most was the chemistry and evolution of the Indiana Fever as a cohesive unit. No longer a team in flux, the Fever displayed a level of connectivity that felt both refreshing and promising. Plays were crisp, cuts were timely, and the ball movement was intentional. Every possession felt like a statement. Clark orchestrated the offense with the command of a seasoned veteran, finding Kelsey Mitchell in rhythm, threading passes to Aaliyah Boston in transition, and dictating tempo without hogging the spotlight. Her ability to seamlessly integrate into the offense without dominating the ball demonstrated a maturity that coaches dream of in young players. This wasn't just Clark putting on a solo show, it was her elevating those around her and helping them find their rhythm. Mitchell, Boston, Hull, and Cunningham all stepped up, proving that Indiana is more than a one-woman operation. But it was the two-woman game between Clark and Boston that truly hinted at the Fever's future identity. Boston's ability to set smart screens and finish around the rim complements Clark's court vision perfectly. And together, they look poised to become one of the league's most dynamic duos. As Clark dazzled, so too did Kelsey Mitchell, whose 17-point performance, including 4 three-pointers, showed that the Fever now boast a true 1-2 punch from the perimeter. Mitchell's defensive presence also stood out with 3 steals, highlighting a newfound intensity on both sides of the floor. Her seamless interplay with Clark made it appear as if the two had been teammates for years, and it's that kind of synergy that could turn Indiana into a playoff threat. Aaliyah Boston contributed significantly as well, with 11 points, 7 rebounds, and 5 assists, displaying a balanced game that elevated the team on both ends. And then there were the role players. Lexi Hull hit timely threes, Sophie Cunningham brought relentless energy and smart spacing, and veterans like Sydney Colson and Natasha Howard brought grit and playmaking. Even Dana Evans and rookie contributors found their moments to shine. This team wasn't just reacting to Clark's brilliance, they were matching it with purpose. The Fever's defensive transformation under coach Stephanie White was nothing short of stunning. Holding Brazil to single-digit scoring in 2 quarters, the Fever executed with discipline, awareness, and aggression, traits that were inconsistent last season. White's revamped system emphasizes switching, communication, and help defense, and the players responded with tenacity. The intensity never let up, with defenders swarming the ball and capitalizing on transition opportunities. Offensively, the pace was equally impressive. The Fever played with purpose. No wasted possessions, no lazy passes, no unnecessary dribbling. Every movement was calculated, and the energy on the bench mirrored that of the players on the court. From a coaching perspective, this was the blueprint of how the Fever want to play in 2025. Fast, fearless, and unselfish. The momentum of the game continued to build not only with the scoreboard, but with each moment that reminded the world why Caitlin Clark is such a transcendent figure in women's basketball. One of the most memorable sequences came late in the third quarter, when Clark, with only seconds remaining on the shot clock, pulled up from 36 feet out, the same exact spot where she shattered the all-time scoring record in college, and launched a shot that soared with her trademark arc before splashing through the net without touching the rim. It wasn't just a basket, it was a defining moment that blended memory with momentum, a symbolic echo of her past greatness, fused with her professional promise. The crowd erupted to 117 decibels, shaking the arena and sending a wave of emotion that pulsed through the players and fans alike. Even her teammates couldn't contain their reactions. When Clark returned to the bench during a timeout, Sophie Cunningham and Lexi Hull teased her with playful sarcasm, joking that the crowd barely reacted, even though the noise had literally made the building tremble. That moment captured something much deeper than basketball. It revealed the joy, the camaraderie, and the sense of family growing within the Indiana Fever. Clark's passion was visible not just in her performance, but in how she engaged her teammates, clapped for their efforts, gave high fives after defensive stops, and encouraged younger players to shine. She wasn't there to steal the spotlight. She was there to share it. This contagious energy, paired with elite talent and newfound chemistry, suggested that Indiana might finally have the leadership and balance they've been missing for years. And that leadership extended beyond points or assists. It was seen in how Clark made everyone around her better, how she responded to the moment, and how her presence uplifted an entire organization. As the final buzzer sounded on a dominant 108-44 victory over Brazil, the crowd rose as one, not because of a win, but because they had just witnessed something generational. Caitlin Clark checked out of the game to a standing ovation, tears glimmering in her eyes as she embraced former Iowa coaches and acknowledged the fans who had stood by her since day one. In her post-game interview, she spoke not about her performance, but about her gratitude. Gratitude for her teammates, for the Iowa community, and for the chance to play the game she loves in front of people who mean so much to her. She talked about signing autographs for young girls and boys, about making time for friends who no longer play but still support her journey, and about the feeling of being back in that gym, in those shoes, with that crowd. She reflected on how much she had grown, not just as a player, but as a person. And that growth was evident in every decision she made on the court, every interaction with a fan, every leadership gesture to a teammate. As the Fever walked off the floor, what lingered wasn't just the scoreboard or the highlight reel. It was the sense that something larger was happening. The Indiana Fever, once a rebuilding franchise struggling for identity, now seemed poised for a breakout. With veterans stepping up, young players finding their groove, and a generational leader at the helm, the future looked brighter than ever. Caitlin Clark's return wasn't just a moment of nostalgia. It was a declaration, a signal that her story and that of the Indiana Fever is just beginning. The magic that once transformed college basketball now has its eyes set on redefining the WNBA. And based on what the world just witnessed in Iowa, that future may arrive sooner than anyone expected.